All right, my name is Olubunmi Familoni, a writer. I'm going to read and talk about the poems I love. 5 poems. We're going to start with The Mesh by Kwesi Brew. It's a very popular poem. We have come to the crossroads, and I must either leave or come with you. I lingered over the choice, but in the darkness of my doubts, you lifted the lamp of love, and I saw in your face the road that I should take. So, like I said, very, very popular poem, quite popular poem, and also Kwesi Brew, a popular Ghanaian poet, one of their foremost poets. And this poem, of course, not just popular in Ghana or Africa, even globally as well. But first of all, one thing I'd like to say about it is that I think it's a very self-explanatory poem. Speaking about explanation and things like that, I think with poetry and with poems, of course, there's always a multiplicity of interpretations. So, one person sees it differently, another person sees it differently. The poet himself, might mean something else. Now, one example is that, in this particular poem, which is very interesting, is that there's no gender that is mentioned. We know he's talking about love. We know he's talking about making a decision. It's come to a point where a very serious decision has to be made, but nobody knows if he's talking about a man or he's talking about a woman, but we know he's talking about romantic love, most definitely. So like I said, multiplicity of interpretations are always available in poetry. Now, about that, one thing that I've seen in people engaging this poem, whether it's scholarly engagement or literary engagement, most people just go straight into the body of the poem. Yeah, they talk about it. I've read a lot of things about it, and they just talk about it. But one thing I think I've noticed is that people miss the title of this poem and how it also relates to what it talks about. So yeah, I think that's like one of the main things I'm going to talk about. Like I said, there's been like a lot of engagement about the body. Now, this title is called The Mesh. What a mesh is actually like an intersection of crossroads, like multiple crossroads, like a sieve, and things like that. I'm sure you have an idea of what that is. But in this poem, the first line he mentions just the crossroads as well. So we have come to the crossroads. But when you look at that title, The Mesh, is more than just one crossroad. So I think basically the way I saw it, when I thought about it, or every time that I've read it and I've looked at that title first before reading the poem, is that I'm sure he's not talking about one crossroads. Just the same way, when you consider romantic love or you consider your life with lovers, many times you don't have just that one lover. Yeah, people talk about how there's some kind of destination to whether when you're going to get married. I'm not even looking at all those destinations. I'm just talking about romantic affairs in general. So there's not just that one person most of the time. Some people say that they have just one love of their life, and yeah, all well and good to them. But when you think about the title, The Mesh, so there are a lot of crossroads that you get to at different points, and that's what that title, The Mesh, is. You look at how the mesh is formed. Is an intersection, many intersections in different places. So at each crossroad, and the thing about crossroads is that you have to make a decision. Are you going forward? Are you going right? Are you going left? Or are you going back to where it is that you were coming from? And in the mesh, there's always that at different points. So I think even apart from romantic love, I think something else about that title is that you always have to make a decision. There's some point that you get to in your life. It's not always a straight road. Let's just put it that way. It's not always linear. Everything in life doesn't happen linearly. There's some point where you have to veer to the right or to the left. It might be right, it might be wrong in whatever context it is. And so that's exactly what I think that title connotes. And the fact that I also started with that first line where he had also mentioned the crossroads, so you can link it to the title. Then of course he goes on to talking about the decision that he had to make whether he leaves or he comes. As you go right or you go left. In this case, I think it's even more about whether you're going to go forward or you're going to go back. So it's either I leave, go back to where writers are coming from, and you're going forward, whether I'm going to come with you. And so then there's that hesitation that happens in the next line, and then the darkness of the doubt, which is also related to the hesitation as well. So I like the metaphor that comes, right after that, which is, the lamp. You're talking about darkness of the doubts, then the lamp of love. Of course, love doesn't necessarily always mean that, it's going to be bright and all that. But in this, his own case, the darkness is not in the love. The darkness is actually in the context of his doubts, and then the light is in his love. There's all that whole, especially in religion, how love is light and all of that. So lifting the lamp of love, which now illuminates the decision that he's going to make. And he said, I saw in your face the road that I should take. Now, I like how the poem ended, which is the final point. It's not going to be, we don't know what the decision was, really. I like the fact that it was open-ended. You like that. I saw in your face the road that I should take, and that was the end of it. So we don't really know if he's either leaving, or he's coming with the lover. In that case, the road that I should take, it could be that, I've decided that road I'm going to take, I'm going to go back, or I'm going to go forward, or I'm not even doing either of that. I'm just going to go right or left. And that's exactly also what and one more thing, whatever direction that he goes, he's still going to meet another crossroads, which goes back to the title, which is what the mesh represents. So that's it for Kwesi Brew's The Mesh. That's the first poem, a short poem, really. This second one is also another short poem, another very legendary poet as well, from the southern part of Africa, from South Africa, Keorapetse, sorry about that. The thing with South African name, Keorapetse, Kgositsile, Mandela's Sermon. Also another of his most popular poems. One interesting thing, which I feel like a lot of people don't know, or maybe if you are not, sorry about that, if you are not into that whole intersection of rap or hip hop and poetry, you might not know that this poet, Kgositsile, is actually the father of the rapper Earl Sweatshirt. So if that's I said, if you are really into hip hop, that's when you know. So he's Earl Sweatshirt's father. I think the time that he was in exile in the US, that he met Earl Sweatshirt's mom, and then they gave birth to him. But away from all of that, let's look at the poem, and then we'll come back and talk about. So Mandela's Sermon by Keorapetse, Kgositsile. Blessed are the dehumanized, for they have nothing to lose but their patience. False gods killed the poet in me. Now I dig graves with artistic precision. Yes, another short poem that is self-explanatory, explicit in what it's talking about. This one definitely not talking about love like the other one that we had looked at. This one is more about creativity and some of the things that happen. For Kgositsile, I think the background to it would be that he was, from his youth, he was a very what I call it now, he was a very active member of the ANC in South Africa. That's the foremost political party, which was also Mandela's party. So I think that's why that Mandela's Sermon title. So he had always been active in politics from his youth. Was part of why also he got sent. He went into exile as well to the US. So this a very political poem, almost kind of like protest poetry as well. But like I said, it also connects to how politics generally affects the artists. Now, not just the poet or just generally the artist. Really, when he's talking about the dehumanized, is an art metaphor. He's talking about your artists and saying they have nothing to lose but their patience. That's why he now goes on, like in the ending part, said that false gods killed the poet in me. You might interpret it that as some of the really oppressive government forces that were in South Africa during the apartheid period. It would be that. And he said, now I dig graves with artistic precision. So the poet in him has died. So rather than focusing on creating art, what he's now doing is digging graves. And since they've killed him, because digging graves for himself, digging graves for artists as well. So almost kind of like you killing the artist, and then the artist now using his artistic expression to dig graves, metaphors, of course, for themselves. So like I said, also something that is clear, but like I said in the beginning, it can be interpreted in any way, but that's how I read it. And like I said, one of my favorite poems as well, Mandela's Sermon by Kgositsile. All right, let's go to the third poem. So this is also like another popular poet. I won't say one of his most popular poems. Langston Hughes from the Harlem Renaissance in the US, from the civil rights era, he was writing a lot of revolutionary poetry and all of that. This one is called Junior Addict. This one, there are a lot of themes, in it. But yeah, let's read it and we'll come back and talk about a few of those themes. Now, Junior Addict by Langston Hughes. The little boy who sticks a needle in his arm and seeks an out in other worldly dreams, who seeks an out in eyes that droop and ears that close to Harlem screams, cannot know, of course, and has no way to understand it's a sunrise that he cannot see, beginning in some other land, but destined sure to flood, and soon the very room in which he lives, his needle and his spoon, the very room in which today the air is heavy with the drug of his despair. Yet little can tomorrow's sunshine give to one who will not leave. Quick, sunrise, come, before the mushroom bomb pollutes his stinking air with better death than is his living here, with viler drugs than bring today's release in poison from the fallout of our peace. It's easier to get dope than it is to get a job. Yes, easier to get dope than to get a job. Daytime or nighttime job, teenage, pre-draft, pre-lifetime job. Quick, sunrise come, sunrise out of Africa. Quick, come, sunrise, please come. So, quick context for that one. Like I said, of course, you already saw the mention of Harlem there. So, Langston Hughes definitely one of the Harlem Renaissance and foremost poets during the civil rights era. This was around about the 60s when of course black people were dealing with a lot of them trying to get emancipated, or then it was also, since the title is Junior Addict, so you can tell that he's talking about drugs. In this case, yeah, it definitely has to be heroin, because he's talking about needles and needles and spoons and things like that. So the imagery is very clear, what kind of drug it is, and also the fact that it's a drug addiction that he's talking about. So there was that problem, was the epidemic of drug addiction in black neighborhoods especially. And since he mentioned Harlem in this place, so we know that he's talking about the Harlem neighborhood in New York, and also the fact that he was one of the major poets of the Harlem Renaissance as well. Now he starts the poem with the little boy, which also one thing that resonates there is the fact that these were the people that were mostly affected. He didn't need to say that the boy was a black boy. Like, you can just tell. I mean, like I said, he had mentioned Harlem later when he was talking about it, but him just mentioning little boy, I think one thing that also evokes is some kind of pathos, or the fact that there are children that are also involved in it. Most of the time when you think about the drug epidemic, whether in the US or wherever, you are thinking about maybe like older people and all, but you never think about some of the effects on children as well, because a lot of children were also involved in this. So that little boy could be children, could be teenagers as well, because there's some other part in the poem where he had talked about getting a job, where he said, it's easier to get dope than to get a job, daytime or nighttime job. He now said teenage, pre-draft, pre-lifetime job. Now that pre-draft will also take us to some of the context as well, because this poem also happened around the time that there were a lot of black boys that have been drafted into the US Army, to fight for the US in the Vietnam War. Yeah, which of course eventually they bungled and all of that after a lot of destruction. Now, many of those people came back. That's also related to the drug epidemic. Many of them came back, they couldn't get jobs. Then they had like a whole lot of mental health issues. There were a lot of mental breakdowns. And then I think the only solace that they could get was also in drugs as well. So he made that connection already in this particular poem, and it was brilliant the way he made it. And another thing was brilliant was that the fact that he also connected it to the unemployment surge that had happened from that as well, because from some of the mental health issues and all the other psychological issues that they had was from all the horrors that they had seen in Vietnam, and then the fact that they also got disillusioned with the war that was going on in Vietnam as well, which was, when you connect it to what was happening to their own people in the US, the fact that they didn't feel how that happened. They didn't feel they belonged, in the US. Because he mentioned Africa also here as well. I mean, we all know the history of slavery, how these people were brought from Africa, or black people were brought from Africa. So there was that loss of identity. That why are we fighting for a nation that is not really ours. We don't have an identity here. We don't have anything here. I mean, there are people in that country, our people are in that country, in the US, fighting for their lives, and we are in Vietnam fighting for these people, and then we go back, we lose that war, we go back, and we're also still losing. So there's a whole lot that's packed in this poem. I think that's why it's like a really long poem. And like I said, he ends it all with Africa, and you're talking about sunrise and all. Now that sunrise, I think one thing that it represents for the drug addicts, we know that with drug addiction, I mean, you don't even necessarily have to have been a drug addict to know that with drug addiction, and then you're battling mental health issues, there's a lot of gloom that is involved in that, a lot of darkness. You know, you don't know the way out, you're lost, you're trapped, you're groping around there. Then that's where that sunrise imagery now comes from. Talking about quick sunrise, come sunrise out of Africa, connecting it back to the fatherland of those people, where, you know, probably that's where they would find some peace if they can get that identity. So I think, you know, a very brilliant point. You can't talk about, you know, this Junior Addict enough by Langston Hughes. Like I said not one of his most popular points, but there are a whole lot of things if you begin to unpack it. But that's just some of the things I'm just going to touch on. So that was another of my favorites. Now this one definitely, I think Nikki Giovanni, that's the next poem we're going to. Nikki Giovanni is easily one of my favorites poets like ever, because of the force, the fierceness of her poetry, and the simplicity as well. She writes very simply, but you can feel the fire. You can feel how fiery, you know, she really is, and that's what she is. She also was in that, you know, period of the civil rights era, a very revolutionary poet, Nikki Giovanni. This next poem is called My Poem. Now, another context quickly before I read it, you're going to hear somewhere where she says she wrote a poem and, you know, mentioned the title of the poem. So she had written the poem before this one, which caused a lot of trouble in the US at the time. The poem is called Nigger Can You Kill? I mean, imagine that kind of title, and then all what she was talking about in that poem. So she wrote that poem after this one, and how, you know, my life was in danger and all of that. So this poem is called My Poem. I am 25 years old, black female poet, wrote a poem asking, nigger, can you kill? If they kill me, it won't stop the revolution. I have been robbed. It looked like they knew that I was to be hit. They took my TV, my 2 rings, my piece of African print, and my 2 guns. If they take my life, it won't stop the revolution. My phone is tapped. My mail is opened. They've caused me to turn on all my old friends and all my new lovers. If I hate all black people and all Negroes, it won't stop the revolution. If I never write another poem or short story, if I flunk out of grad school, if my car is reclaimed and my record player won't play, and if I never see a peaceful day or do a meaningful black thing, it won't stop the revolution. The revolution is in the streets, and if I stay on the 5th floor, it will go on. If I never do anything, it will go on. First of all, I feel like I didn't do like enough justice to the lyricism in the way that I read it, because, you know, if you really think about it, I think it needs to be read like someone that, you know, probably has like a bit of musicality in the way that they read poetry, because it's a very musical poem. You can, when you're reading it, you can feel it like music. So I'm going to start from the bottom part of it. Like I said, I mean, you can hear the word revolution, and like I said, she was a very fierce poet, a very fierce young woman. She was 25 when she wrote this, as she said, and also like a very angry woman as well, also because of like what she felt like was the revolution that was supposed to happen to liberate the black people, liberate black people in the US. So I like the fact that you know, in that last stanza where she talked about the revolution is in the streets, and if I stay on the 5th floor, it will go on. If I never do anything, it will go on. What she kept saying, you know, about that, what she kept reiterating was the fact that no matter what you do, there are people that have been part of revolutions. You know, let's just, you know, use that generic word. People that have been part of revolutions, you know, part of some kind of movement or the other. And at some point, maybe like, you know, they first felt disenchanted and then they dropped out of it and all. You think about what she's saying, that even if she's the one, like with how passionate she is about the revolution, let's call it the Black Revolution of the 60s, if she dropped out of it, if she left it, it will still go on. So one person is not the revolution. I like the fact that she acknowledged that fact and also tried to make people see it as well. That Nikki Giovanni is not the revolution. Martin is not the revolution. Malcolm X is not the revolution. The revolution is the people in the streets, the people that are actually driving that movement. That's why, of course, she talked about how it is in the streets. Staying on the fifth floor is staying detached from it, on top of everything, and just looking down on it like, well, all of this doesn't concern me. So if I do that as Nikki Giovanni, as one of the leading figures, one of the forces of the revolution, it's not going to stop the revolution. Also, said like a bunch of other things as well. If I never write another poem, because she was always writing these very strong poems or short story or whatever, my car is reclaimed, all the regular things that happen in life, or do a meaningful black thing as well, which I think that's very, very explicit. It's not going, all of that is not going to stop the revolution. So, of course, started the poem with an introduction, and like I said, also made sure to remind you that she had written that poem, "Nigger, Can You Kill?" Then the next line was, "If they kill me." So, after writing that poem, there were a lot of eyes on her. He even talked about some parts where they took her guns, her phone was tapped, and all of that. So that there were eyes on her. Like, for you to write this kind of poem, and also with the kind of figure that you are in the black community, like we were in the black community at that time, a threat to the American society. So there were eyes on her at that point. But she said that irrespective of all of that, the revolution is going to go on, even if she was killed. Of course, remember what had happened to like a lot of the leading figures, from Fred Hampton to the other Panthers that had also been killed as well. But revolution went on. But the question from all of this will now be, many years, many decades after that, what has really happened to this revolution that people like Nikki Giovanni, people like Langston Hughes, Imam Amir Baraka, and other poets, other foremost poets of that particular period, were writing about, were shouting about what has happened to that revolution. I think when you read poems like this from people like Nikki Giovanni, so that's some of the things that you consider, like in contemporary times, what has happened to that revolution they are talking about, or maybe even if there was even any revolution at all. Now, the last one, also one of the most popular poems out of Nigeria, also got a lot of global acclaim as well. J.P. Clark, poet, dramatist, also a very versatile writer as well. Ibadan as the poem, because there are a lot of people that can actually recite this poem off the top of their head. But Ibadan, running splash of rust and gold flung and scattered among seven hills like broken china in the sun. Another very short and musical poem as well, which, like I said, I don't think I did justice to the reading of it. But you get the idea of it. I think it's just fitting, since it's the town that we're in Ibadan. I think there's always a sense of pride for people that have lived in Ibadan for a long time, or that come from Ibadan, or that have some kind of roots in Ibadan. Someone like J.P. Clark. Now, when you hear the name J.P. Clark, you can tell he's not his origins not in Ibadan, but also has some footprints in Ibadan, from the University of Ibadan. So that's why I said that for people that have passed through Ibadan at some point, culturally, academically, in whatever way, politically, even there's some sense of belonging, there's some sense of pride that this particular poem evokes in you when you read this. And apart from the sense of belonging, there's also that sense of understanding what he's talking about in this. What the running splash of rust is. You don't have to, nobody needs to explain it to you. That you have to have been in Ibadan, or maybe seen pictures, but I think pictures don't always do justice to it. I'd written some essay at some point about the first time that I'd come to Ibadan and witnessed all of this. So like I said in that essay, I don't think pictures did justice that running splash of rust, which is the brown roofs, of course, if we need to start stating it like that. And gold flung and scattered among seven hills. And of course, we know how it is with the seven hills that surrounded. Like I said, you have to have experienced Ibadan physically, lived experience in Ibadan for you to understand this matter of the seven hills that surround the city of Ibadan. And it said like broken china in the sun. Perfect imagery right there. So, like I said, fitting way to end the poems I love, J.P. Clark's Ibadan. Thank you.